So it is reliable. Not only that, but I think we can show that it is historical, because you could be thinking, okay, well, it's accurately preserved. It's what the original authors wrote, but what if they made it up? What if they were just lying? What if they were different people in different places and they were writing these stories? Now, definitionally, something that's historical is an actuality of persons or events having the truthful quality of being part of history, as opposed to being fiction, legend, or myth. And so that scholarly piece of work known as the Da Vinci Code, you might be thinking, I think it's a piece of something, but I don't know if scholarly piece of work is what the word that comes to my imagination is. In it, the main character, one of the main characters, Sir Lee Teabing, says the Bible has evolved through countless translations, additions, and revisions. History has never had a definitive version of the book. And sort of points to other gospels that present other caricatures of Jesus as evidence for this. Now, if we actually look at these other gospels, especially compared to the gospels that are in the Bible, we see something very interesting. At the end of the day, the only books talking about Jesus that come from the time frame of Jesus are the 27 books that we refer to as the New Testament. Full stop, end of story. That's it. If you're talking about the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, they're coming from times when the names attached to them are far too late. Those people were dead. That's not true for Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, or the letters of Paul or Peter. The 27 books of the New Testament come from the time frame that Jesus came from. And that's why they were codified in our Bible. That's why these other ones weren't really considered, because the early Christians knew these popped up far later. Now here's another way. One of the clearest indications of familiarity for the gospel writers of the context they are writing comes from the knowledge of personal names. Now, why on earth would that be true? Well, there was a study done, a very interesting study, where they looked at names in the ancient world. Now, stick with me here, because I think this is fascinating. What they did is they looked at different sources, the Roman Jewish writer Josephus, these bone boxes that the Jews would put the remains of their dead in and then carve their name in Greek on the side. And they looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls in comparison with the New Testament. And they looked at the most popular names in this time period for this geographical area. And what they found was that they came up with a list of what the most popular names were, because, time goes on and names become more popular or fall out of popularity. That's just true for most things, right? When I was going to school, there were names that were popular that aren't popular now. And so you can sort of figure out what was popular in particular time periods. Now, the New Testament is particularly interesting because it has lots of lists of names. In fact, in Matthew's gospel, his biography of Jesus' life, he has a whole list of the disciples. And in the disciples, if we take that study of all the other names in this area for this time period and we compare it to, say, the list of that we get in the New Testament, what we find is something very fascinating about the most common names. They have what Wikipedia calls disambiguators. Disambiguators. The names are qualified that are the most popular, right? This makes sense. When I was in elementary school, there were a dozen Michaels and Sarahs. And so in order to figure out who the Michael you're talking about is compared to who the Michael I'm talking about is, you need to differentiate it, right? You need to have, tall Michael as opposed to short Michael. So here's what we see when we look at the most popular names. We see that Simon is the most popular name for this geographical area for this time period. Now, Simon has a disambiguator. He has a qualifier, right? He's called Peter. James, he's the most 11th popular name. He's the son of Alphaeus. John, number 5, is his brother. Philip, though, number 61, not a popular name, no disambiguator. Bartholomew, another Greek name, not a popular name. Number 50, no disambiguator. But Matthew is number 9, so he's the tax collector. You have a second James. You really have to figure out which James you're talking about. So he's the son of Alphaeus. Thaddeus, another Greek name, not super popular, 39, no disambiguator. You have 2 Simons, Simon called Peter, but then you have another one, Simon the Canaanian, the Canaanite. Most popular name, he has a qualifier. And then Judas is number 3, and he's Iscariot who also betrayed Jesus. What this tells us is that the New Testament gets the most popular names write for the exact time period and geographical location that it's claiming to be written in. And this is not true for some of these other Gospels. If we take the ones that have the most frequent use of names, particularly the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, and Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas is our earliest one, and it has the most names. James, Jesus, Mary, Matthew, Salome, Simon, Peter, and of course, the Gospel of Thomas has Thomas. The Gospel of Judas only names Judas and Jesus, and the Gospel of Mary, it names a few others. It has Andrew, Levi, Mary, and Peter. It doesn't even name Jesus. It calls him the Savior. But some of these Gospels have other names in them, names that were not popular in, say, first century Judea, but they were popular in like 2nd and 3rd century Egypt. Names like Adamus, Adonias, Bableo, Eve, Gabriel, Dalia, Nebro, Sophia, Yobel. Why do they have these names? Well, spoiler alert, they're talking about, and sorry, not they're talking about, they're written in places like 3rd century Egypt. They're not coming from the time period that they're claiming to talk about in the time and geographical location. And yet, when we apply the same standard to the New Testament, we find that it does. It comes up reliable.